Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Laura Waite and welcome to this session entitled From Ebenezer to Elf, exploring representations of disability at Christmas. So I'm a senior lecturer in disability studies and I'm based in the School of Social Science. So first off, what I'd like you to do is just to pause this video for a moment and see if you can note down the names of each of these films that we might watch at Christmas. While some are set at Christmas, a couple of these are what we might associate as always being on at Christmas, despite them not being about Christmas per se. So, did you get them all? So along the top we've got The Wizard of Oz, we've got Elf, we've got The Muppets Christmas Carol, and then on the bottom row we've got It's a Wonderful Life, Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, and Disney's new version of A Christmas Carol. And what these films have in common is that they all feature in some way disability. So one of the things that we're interested in our academic discipline is how disability features and is used in various cultural products such as film, books, TV, social media. Because for many, their only experience of disability is what they see in these television programs and films. Therefore, these cultural products become the only way of learning about disability. And as Barnes says here, just as racist and sexist attitudes can be learnt through the media, so too can ableist attitudes be learned. And I want us to think about some of the messages that we can get from some of the representations of disability in the context of Christmas productions. So disability is commonly used in films as a sort of plot device. So in A Christmas Carol, for example, we have the character Tiny Tim, who is a young boy with physical impairment and uses a crutch. In the story, he's referred to as a cripple. Just pause this video a moment and watch the YouTube clip. So Tiny Tim is central to the story and is portrayed as an object of pity, which is a common stereotype of disability that we find in film, literature and television. Disability can be used in film to support the narrative arc of circumstances starting out as sad or hopeless, but then the disabled character is central to the situation turning happy and hopeful. So in A Christmas Carol, Scrooge's pity for Tiny Tim is one of the main drivers in his transformation from mean-spirited and unsociable to generous and hospitable. In It's a Wonderful Life, there's a mean and ruthless character named Mr. Potter, who's a greedy banker. Interestingly, the producer decided to make the character as someone who uses a wheelchair. You might just be able to see the elaborate wooden structure that he is pushed around in the film by his silent assistant. Again, a frequently used stereotype of disability is disabled person as sinister and evil. It is common for the villain character in film to be given an impairment to add to their evilness. Think about Bond villains, Largo with his artificial eye in Never Say Never Again, or Dr. No with his prosthetic hands, or even Disney villains, Captain Hook with his hooked arm, Peg-Leg Pete in Mickey Mouse. In addition, in It's a Wonderful Life, George, who is the main character and played by the brilliant James Stewart, is cast as having hearing impairment, but why give the character an impairment? Throughout the film, he is seen struggling to follow conversation and understand things, and again we see the commonly used narrative of disabled person as a burden. Being deaf on top of his financial problems contributes to his feelings of being a burden on his family and that they would be better off without him, and this of course leads to him having suicidal thoughts. Now let's think about comedy, and in particular I'm going to focus on how people with dwarfism are used for our amusement. I'm showing here images of Oompa Loompas from Roald Dahl's Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, the Munchkins from The Wizard of Oz, Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs, and various characters from The Elf. People with dwarfism have been used as a means of entertainment for centuries, and would seem that this continues in the 21st century. A friend of mine recently went to a wedding and for so-called entertainment, the happy couple had hired a man with dwarfism who dressed up as a baby in a nappy and dummy, and guests were encouraged to be photographed with him sat on their knee. And another festive activity that we might engage in if we're not collapsed in front of the Christmas movie is that of the great British institution, the pantomime. Again, pause the video and click on the YouTube link. So one of my colleagues here at Hope, Dr. Erin Pritchard, who has dwarfism, researches the experience of others with dwarfism, and here on the slide is a quote by a participant in one of her studies. It's difficult for parents to take their children to see Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs and encourage them to laugh, and then when they come out of the theatre somebody like me walks along and then they tell them not to laugh. It must be very confusing for that to happen to a child. That was Ivy, cited in Pritchard 2014. So we can see that there is a direct impact of various representations on the lived experiences of disabled people. Now what I'd like you to do is to click on this link and think about this different representation of people with dwarfism. When you've watched the clip, think about the themes that might emerge from it, and think about whether or not programs such as this challenge attitudes or create further stigma. So now let's watch a clip from The Elf featuring Peter Dinklage. So again, pause the video and click on the link. So what did you think of this? What are we actually laughing at? What is different here is that Dinklage's character as Miles Finch is important and influential. He is a talented publisher who has been called in for his expertise. Actually what we're laughing at is Elf, not so much Miles Finch. So representations can challenge dominant characterizations of disability too. In fact, many of Peter Dinklage's performances challenge head-on the stereotyping of people with dwarfism. Think about his character Tyrion Lannister in the Game of Thrones as an example. And in our subject we make a distinction between disability humour and disabling humour. In disability humour we're typically laughing at the attitudes of society towards disabled people. So for example in The Office in the UK there is a character called Brenda played by Julia Fernandez who uses a wheelchair, but at no point do we laugh at her impairment. Instead we are laughing all the time at Brent's awkwardness around her. Disabling humour, on the other hand, is when we are actually laughing at a person's impairment, like the pathetic jokes we saw in the pantomime advert. Finally, let's come back to the lived experiences of disabled people. Using the link on the slide, read the article from the Liverpool Echo, which is based on an interview with my colleague Dr. Erin Pritchard. Then discuss what you think about her experiences and to what extent you feel that these are a product of stereotypical representations of disabled people. Okay, so that's all from me then. If you've got any questions at all, or you'd like any information about the courses that I teach on in disability studies and special educational needs, then please get in touch. And for those of you that do celebrate, Merry Christmas to you all.